All right, so we're live, we're recorded. The Run Club screen is in the chat box. Again, go ahead and download that so you can follow along. And at any point, raise your hand. I'm looking at all of you right now. When I share my screen, that'll change slightly. You can put something in the chat box. I'll check it periodically. Suze, if you want to kind of monitor the chat box and stop me, I'm not going to mute all participants or anything. I'd like to have an open conversation. I think that after we go through the screen, we'll save some time, however much you guys want, to talk about maybe some of the findings that were relevant to you particularly, or relevance of any of the tests and how that might pertain to your running. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. All right.
Pete, I can't see the document. Can anybody else find it on the chat box?
You can't find it?
I don't see it there. So I just didn't know if it was just a me problem or if everybody.
No, it's probably a me problem. Let me see if I can figure that out real quick.
The only thing I see in the chat is what I wrote.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Tell me if it comes through. I'm gonna go in there again. All right. Did that go?
Yeah, it's there.
You got it? Okay, cool. Thank you, Suze. So it's in there. And that'll be again following along in the second part. So I gave a talk about a year or so ago, and it's on YouTube. If you find this interesting and want a little bit more detail, I called it How to Build a Better Runner. And this is going to be very brief in regards to the content there, but more concise and to the point that you can apply right away. But if you want to be a better runner, you've got to avoid injury. It may be too late for that. You might have injuries that you've dealt with. We get this litany as we continue to log the miles, but you got to understand how to manage that appropriately and how to not fall back into that trap. These injuries aren't usually traumatic. You know, not a lot of runners are falling off cliffs. It's repetitive overuse. It's repetitive strain. And if you optimize your mobility, optimize your strength, you can minimize the risk of injury. So we go into that in the next few slides. What are the key elements of your mobility? And what are the key elements of your neuromuscular control? And what are the key elements of your motor control that will keep you from getting injured? By motor control, we're talking about posture, body mechanics, and running mechanics. We won't get as much into that tonight. At the end, though, when we talk about questions, I'm open to any and all. And that's a lot of Suze's ballpark as well. I know she's got you working on that out at the track and on your runs. We won't talk in depth in this time, but physiological resilience and the relevance of that to your running. If you're not breathing well, if you're not using your diaphragm well at rest while you sleep, it's going to negatively impact your run. If you sleep 4 to 5 hours a night, you're not going to run as well. You need 7 to 8 hours. 8 hours is usually what most experts will say. 7, we fudge it because we don't want to make people feel bad. But I have so many clients come in that are sleeping 4, 5, 6 hours a night, and that is detrimental to performance. Diet, also key. Stress management. They've done studies on college athletes to show that they always perform worse during like finals weeks or stressful times. Doesn't have to be physical stress. It can be mental stress. So how you manage your stress, very important. And recovery is often left off. That is a key element of training that we don't think of. It's like the absence of training. So we don't want to talk about it, but how you recover and what you do and how you build in recovery is very important. This is again, the last part, optimizing your training. That's a lot of what Suze can work with you on. It's what's your frequency, intensity, and mileage. And then footwear. Thank you, Fleet Feet. I know this group's associated with Fleet Feet, and footwear plays a huge role. I will be giving a talk on like running footwear at some point. So I'll let Suze know about that. But there's so many options out there. It's confusing. Trick is find what works for you. And if you found that, stick with it. Don't get too cute. But again, open to questions at the end if there's anything in specific to footwear. So again, 80% of runners every year, they do research on this, get injured. If you're injured, you're either doing something wrong or could be doing something better. So let's look at what we need to do to avoid injury and get better. Optimizing mechanical capacity. This means how much movement do you have available to you? The key aspects that a runner needs are optimal hip extension. That means the leg going behind you without extending your spine. After I go through this and show you some of the pictures, I can demonstrate a bit more. But we need at least 15 to 20 degrees of hip extension. You can measure this in many different ways. I'll show you a couple, and I want you to measure it on yourself and see, do you have the capacity to extend from your hip, or for you to drive yourself forward? Are you constantly having to elevate your spine because you lack that mobility? That's not only going to make you less powerful, but it's going to make you more likely to suffer from low back pain and other issues up and down the chain. We need optimal ankle dorsiflexion. So we're looking at 20 to 25 degrees of ankle bend, knee over toes during mid stance. So how stiff is your ankle? If your ankle is very stiff, it can be impacting your knee. That ankle dorsiflexion acts as shock absorption. If you can't absorb at the ankle, you're going to absorb up the chain, at the knee, and ultimately at the hip and into the low back. First toe extension. The big toe needs 30 degrees of extension while the ankle is in that dorsiflexed position. A lot of people don't push off of their big toe well. It's important to use your big toe because about 70% of the intrinsic muscle capacity of the foot is associated with the big toe. That means of all the muscles that start and stop in your foot and support your arch, 70% of that capability is associated with the big toe. If you don't push off your big toe, or you can't extend your big toe well, you start to like rotate your foot outward. You start to roll off like the base of the big toe versus allowing that big toe to actually extend. So a lot of people lack that mobility, and also people sometimes have that mobility, they just don't utilize it. So when we go through the screen, we're going to be looking at ourselves in sideline. This is just an active hip extension test. And what we want to see is, with the knee bent to 90 degrees, can you get your knee in line with your body? If you can do so with the knee bent, this isn't a perfect test. We're assuming that you'd be able to, with the leg straight, get that leg far enough behind your body while maintaining neutral spine. You see my top arm kind of in a weird position. My hand's monitoring my low back to make sure that my low back isn't lifting and arching. So again, I'll demonstrate that and go through that with you, but this is a quick test that you can use. There's a few other tests you can use, like lying at the end of a bed, pulling one knee up to your chest and letting the other leg fall off the bed. And I can demonstrate that if you want, or I'll also demonstrate a doorway stretch and a way to block your back in a doorway and see how far back you can get your leg. So we'll go through a couple of those. Last time we were out at the field going through some of this stuff, but if you have a doorway or a wall with you, we can look at it a few different ways. The way that we'll look at the amount of bend in your ankle is either standing, getting your knee over toes to the wall, or you can do this in half kneeling. And if you have a piece of paper, you can like put your foot on the piece of paper and see how far over your toes your knee can get. It's debatable what's good, what's bad. I'm looking for generally about 4 to 5 inches here. See a lot of people come in with 2 on one side and 3.5 on the other. The asymmetry is the problem. One of my mentors once said, if you're tight and symmetrical, be aware, but if you're tight and asymmetrical, beware, because it's those asymmetries that are going to come back.
Okay, you can take it off the other one.
And it's going to lead to compensations. All right. So we'll be looking at the ability of that knee to go over the toes, and then we'll be looking at the ability of that big toe to extend. You can see I'm just pulling up on my big toe. You want to see about 30 degrees of motion here. Easy to eyeball and say, 45 degrees is halfway between 90 degrees. And if you're splitting hairs, probably best to work on this. So 30 is what we're looking for. Closer to 45 would be optimal. After looking at those key aspects of mobility, we're going to look at the key elements of strength and endurance. You need to have good ability to activate your core, to stabilize your spine and transfer energy from upper body to lower body. So there's a few tests that we're going to go through for core stability. And we tie that in with a test called the Bunkie test, which uses different plank positions to challenge the front, the back, the outside, and the inside of your legs as it relates to your core. There's opportunities we can talk to at the end about foot stability and foot coordination series and activating that big toe. I'm not going to go through that in this screen directly, but at the end we can talk about it. Looking at strength and power from the glutes and the ability to drive the leg forward. and elasticity and stiffness through the lower extremity. We're going to be looking at components of this test here. This is the Bunkie test. And so we're going to get ourselves into each of these positions to look at our core stability as it relates to, again, the outside of our body, the inside of our leg, the front of our body, and the back of our leg. The goal is to be able to hold each of these positions for about 40 seconds. If you can't get into the position, that's relevant. We need to work on that. If you can't do a side plank and lift the top leg, but you can hold a side plank, start there. And then I had a client today that we're working on a side plank from his bed, essentially. I had him on my table in here so that he's at an angle because he can't lift his top leg, or he can't lift his right leg when his left leg's down. History of a hip fracture, weak left hip, lots of problems now on the right side. Increased stance time on the right side, overusing the right side, not accessing the left hip well. Can't do this test when the left side's down, and it's because he can't stabilize his left hip. So you guys might notice certain things and certain asymmetries on yourself, and that's why I'd like to talk through at the end and say, well, what's this relevant, if you don't mind sharing, like maybe an injury or what you're dealing with. After we go through the Bunkie test, we're going to go through single leg squat. We're going to set a metronome so that we do 1 every 2 seconds. We're going to squat to about 45 degrees. If you got your butt to your knees, that'd be 90. I want you to go somewhere in between there. And I'll show you generally how I want you to squat. You can see that my leg that I'm not standing on, my thigh is still parallel. That's so that my hips are balanced and neutral. In this, I'm showing like sort of hands across chest, spine neutral, but I'm also going to have you use your arms like you're running as we go through this reciprocal motion of a single leg squat. The goal is that you could do 25 on each leg and 1 every 2 seconds. Okay. Then we'll go through a single leg heel raise. And if you have a wall, ideally you're leaning at a wall with a slight forward lean, the way that you would be running with a slight forward lean. Opposite knee is going to be up high enough that it engages the glute of the leg that you're working on. And this time we'll set a metronome to 1 per second. So every second you're up onto your toes. The goal again is 25. The biggest issues I see with this is people start rolling to the outside of their foot, indicating, one, they're not using their big toe. That's most important. Or they might be lacking stability of posterior tibialis, which is a stabilizer from the lower leg to the foot, or the intrinsic foot muscles. So if you find it hard to stay balanced and engaging that big toe, you either have a mobility limitation of the big toe or weakness of your posterior tib and your intrinsic muscles of your foot. The second biggest thing I see, maybe the first, might be tied. People have a hard time not bending their knee as they start driving up onto their toes. And what that indicates is they can't stabilize the knee with the quad while they use their soleus to push off. And it's a balance between using that glute to stabilize the hip, that quad to stabilize the knee, and then to be able to drive off of those toes. So you want to keep that knee locked out so that we're challenging gastroc soleus together, the 2 calf muscles. All right, and then after we go through this screen, we'll come back and talk a little bit about how this relates to motor control, posture, ideal alignment. As much as you guys want to get into, I can be with you, but the bread and butter is going to be going through the screen. The biggest thing I'll say about posture and alignment is just we've got to stack our blocks, and our blocks are our head, but the most important as far as core stability is stacking our rib cage on top of our pelvis. Most people elevate their rib cage or depress their rib cage, and they're tending to kind of lean back, and there's this extension moment. There's this hinge in their Coke can. If you look at this blue block structure, if someone loaded weight on top of that block structure, it would be pretty stable. But if you take that rib cage block and you tip it back or you tip it forward, it's going to cause pressure. Downward pressure is going to cause it to buckle. Those buckle points become weaknesses. They become areas where force doesn't transfer, rather it's absorbed. A lot of those points are C5, C6, L4, L5, areas in the spine where we lose that force transfer. And it's not coincidental that these are the areas that people tend to degenerate in. So motor control, alignment, important when you're standing, important when you're running. You'll optimize your access to your strength if you're positioned correctly. All right, we can come back to this. All right, so I'll stop sharing my screen. And what I'd like you guys to do is find hopefully you have an area with a yoga mat. or something like that. I've got this behind me here. I've got my sound turned up. Holler at me if you have questions, but this is on this sheet, what we'll go through. I'm just going to go down the list one by one, looking at the ability of the ankle to bend, the toe to extend, and then we'll look at hip extension. After we go through the mobility, I'll come back. If you have any questions, let's talk about that. And then we're going to go through the neuromuscular part. Okay. So be where you can see me. I don't necessarily need to see you, but if you can arrange it as such, I'll keep an eye out and give some pointers. You may have a ruler at home. You may not. You may just have a piece of paper. But what you can do is, in kneeling, take the sheet of paper, put it right at the end of your toes. If you have one, you could always come back to this too. Let the knee go as far forward as possible. Take your forearm so it's vertical and put the knuckle down against the paper. Put a little mark on the paper. You can measure in that way. If you have a ruler, very easy and convenient. Take the ruler, put it so that your big toe is at 0. Take the knee forward, get your forearm as vertical as possible. I'm at about 5.5 inches on this right side. And then I would go and measure my left side. If I'm not keeping track based on inches and I just have the sheet of paper without my ruler, I'm just putting each leg, so each big toe at the end of the piece of paper, taking the knee forward, getting my forearm down in relationship to it, and marking. I know I'm going back to my ruler now because I have it. My left is at 6 and my right was at 5.5. Small asymmetry, probably within, in this context, room or of measurement error, potentially. But what I want to know from you guys on this when we come back together in a minute is, was there anyone with a major asymmetry or someone that was at like 1 or 2? Then that's going to be where the problems start to arise, where it's deficient in the number or very asymmetrical side to side. Okay. You can also do this against the wall if you'd like. And in my clinic, I put a piece of tape down, and I don't have it here, but in my room I do. But I could do knee to wall in the same way and just work my way back and then mark on the sheet of paper and then compare side to side. I call this the tail of the tape, and I have people check it every time that I'm working on their ankle range of motion and trying to chip away. Sometimes we get a 1/2 inch, sometimes we get 1 inch in the session, and we got to keep that. Okay. So that's ankle dorsiflexion. Remember what we were saying, we want about 4.5 inches if we can to run. Most of the research shows, based on running evaluations, you need at least 20 to 25 degrees. Most of you don't have like a goniometer at home, so we're talking in inches, but about 3.5 to 4 inches would correspond to the minimum. Now get that knee over the toe so that you're in kneeling again, and your knee is right over your toe line. Take your one of your hands and lift that big toe, and see if you can lift that big toe at least 30 degrees. Again, see if you can get it close to 45, which is easier to eyeball, between 0 and 90, between flat and straight up. And I want you to see how easy is it to lift that big toe. I'll do it on this foot so you can get a little bit clearer view. Knee over toe line, lift that big toe. Left toe is definitely stiffer for me. I've probably got about 20 degrees on this left toe, and it feels stiff on top of the foot. Right toe, I can lift to probably 30 to 40 degrees. Is there a difference in what you feel or what you eyeball as far as your measure and lifting your big toes? I played a lot of like indoor volleyball, and I was an outside hitter. And when I would land, my left foot would always jam in. So I know that my left toe is stiff because of footwear issues related to my volleyball. So I'd always jump and land with my left foot forward and jam. And then as I was running more and more, it took me a while, but I figured out I was running in about a size too small of a shoe. And in my running, I didn't have enough space at the end of the shoe, and I was jamming my big toe. And my left toe paid the price a little bit more because of my history of the volleyball injury plus the footwear. But that big toe needs to be able to extend again to access musculature and allow you to push off as best as you can. Now go ahead and lie on your side. And what I'd like you to do to check your hip extension, support your head with one arm, get your knees so they're bent to about 90 degrees. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Bring your bottom knee, keep it so that it's as high as your hip. If you want it a little bit past your hip, you can do that too. Sorry, I'm wearing like black on black here. It's a little hard to see. I'm going to take my top leg, keeping the knee bent to about 90 degrees, and I'm going to swing it back behind me without arching my back. And I want to see, essentially, can I look down my body and still see my knee? If I can still see my knee down my body, it's not in line with my body. All right, so that's a good quick self-test that you can take. If you have someone there with you, you could have them take a picture. See how well are you able to get that leg behind you. Now with the knee bent, there's added tension on the quad. So if that knee was straight, there'd be less tension on the quad. And we're saying if you can get to neutral with the knee bent, you can likely get close to that 15 to 20 that we want otherwise. Then check the other side. Knees bent to 90 degrees, top leg kicking behind you, back staying in neutral. Okay, I've got a little bit of limitation on both sides. I'd give myself wanting another 5 to 10 degrees. So feel that, check that on yourself. And then I'm going to show you 2 other quick ways that you can look at this. One is if I go into a door frame. So if I'm against a door frame and I flatten my back against the door frame, preventing me again from arching, because this arch is a bailout. When I'm running, I'm either pushing off well from my hip or I'm compensating and I'm going to lift up and extend. All right, so I want to get that drive and that extension from my hip and from my pelvis. So I flatten my back against the door frame so that I can't get my fingers through here. I take my leg and I put my toes behind me and I straighten the knee. Now, most of the time when I get someone into this position, they do not have the coordination to straighten the knee without arching the back and lifting up. So the goal is, can you keep your back in neutral, slightly past neutral, to exaggerate, and drive that knee back and forward? And if so, what I'll do is I'll measure the angle here from the angle of the torso to the angle of the hip to the knee. And that's where I really want to see 15 to 20 degrees. This also becomes a great mobility exercise because you'll feel how you really drive from your glute and quad and how you have to really lengthen through the front. You can get a good sense of that drive that you need when you run from the quad and the glute without overusing the calf. I'll come back to that when we talk about the strength section. So you can try that in the doorway if you'd like. And then I'll show you one other option that you may or may not be familiar with on a table or on a bed. Okay. So the last thing at the edge of your bed, and you could try this later too, is if I lie at the edge and I bring one knee up to my chest so the back is flat, I let the other leg drop. And I want that leg to drop to the table. And I want to be able to bend my quad to 90 degrees with my thighs touching the table. And I'm not touching the table quite. I'm lacking about 5 degrees or so, pointing to the fact that I'm tight in my hip flexors. This is another way to look at it, and you can look at it side to side. Either way, however you're getting about it, how well do you extend your hip? Because if you don't have the mobility, doesn't matter if you have the strength. You don't have the strength in that range of motion because you don't even have that range of motion. Okay? So you can kind of play around with some of those. And then let's just briefly chat if there's anyone out there that found something that was very asymmetrical or very limited. I had a professional soccer player I was working with this week, and I did that table test, and the guy was limited by probably like 30 degrees. Both of his hip flip, like his with his back flat, his hip angle was like 30 degrees still. And it was incredible. And what he's dealing with from a discomfort, pain, compensation standpoint was like, whoa, this is low hanging fruit. Let's take care of this. Let's pick the low hanging fruit first. So did you guys pass those tests? Maeve, you're laughing. What one are you laughing at?
Yeah, I tried them. I tried to keep up with you, and it's interesting. The right and left ankle, definitely my right ankle has more mobility.
Okay.
But my toes have very little. Like it's just the top of my toes that are moving,
Okay.
not from the kind of like the actual knuckle or hinge part, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's the right side where I get a lot of my recurring pain.
Okay.
So it could be I don't know. I mean, I'm just assuming maybe it's overcompensating in some way.
That's
So the lack of mobility on the left side.
So the left side's the lack of mobility of the ankle. Both
Yeah.
those limited. Right side tends to be more.
Maybe it takes some of the strain. I'm not sure.
How is hip extension?
Hip extension. Well, I thought I could see my knee, and then I tried the one on the door frame, and I couldn't even get my back flat to the door frame, so it wasn't really going anywhere.
Okay, so that's kind of like a mix of mechanical and like neuromuscular, like your body's ability to coordinate. Like a lot of people are so entrenched in their motor habits that they like don't move from your spine. You just can't do it. You're like, well, what do I do? So that becomes an interesting. It's a good exercise for you. Take it slow, practice, like you could find it. And then it'd also be really interesting then to watch you run, knowing what we saw in these little breakdowns, and does it translate into your running? So next time you're out of the track, you can ask one of your teammates here, like, am I even able to push off my big toes? Or are you just kind of like foot out externally rotated, forgetting about them?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
all right. So this will be about 10, maybe 5-10 minutes more. And we're going to go through the neuromuscular screen. So on this page, we're going to go through the test, the Bunkie test. And I'll set it up. I have one of those Tabata timers. The goal's 40. If you can't hold for 40, don't hold for 40. If you can't, all of these are single leg version tests. I'll demonstrate the positions and then we'll go through it together. What the timer will keep us on is 40 seconds on, 15-second rest. 40-second other side, 15-second rest. Then we go into the next version. We're going to start with a front plank, go to a side, do the back plank, and then go to the other side. So again, I'll show you those positions and then we'll time it. Stick to 2 legs if you can't do one. If you can do one, time each side. And then you'll write down the times, or you keep track of the times and see if there's a major difference side to side. After I demonstrate that, I'll show you briefly how I want you to do the single leg squat with me. And we're going to see, are you able to do 25 on each leg, one every 2 seconds? One every 2 seconds. And then we'll go through the single leg heel raise. Take about 10 minutes, be a good quick workout too. Just know your body. Don't push yourself if there's pain. If there's pain, you put a little like X in the box. And that's something that should be worked through. Talk to Suze or talk to me about that. Okay. So back to the mat I go. The first position is going to be a normal front plank, but I'm going to lift one leg. And when I lift that one leg, there should be no shift in my system. I don't want to drop my hip on that side. I don't want to have to lift myself up. I just lift the leg and I hold. Goal's 40 seconds. We'll take a break and then we'll do the other side. So why don't you just try that position real quick? Try just the ability to be in a front plank and unload one leg at a time. to know if you're going to be able to do the single leg version or if you should stick to the 2-leg version and see if in the 2-leg version you can hit your 40-second mark. Okay. All right, now you're kind of following, I can see a couple of you following along. Go into a side plank position. And there's 2 different side plank variations. The first one is side plank, top leg lifted and held. See if you're able to do that. If you can, you'll run a long single leg and see how long you can hold. If you can't, you can take the 2-leg. Okay, the second side plank variation, you bring your bottom knee up to about 90 degrees. You plank up, dig the top inner foot into the ground to stabilize the adductors, the groin, and pick the bottom leg up. So you're doing a side plank where the inside of your top leg is holding you up. Okay, so if you could do that, you stick with it. If you can't like lift the bottom leg, that goes to X in the box, and you can do just the 2-leg version. The last position is going to be a back plank position. Now, if you have shoulders that are uncomfortable in this position, what I'd recommend is substitute and go to a single leg bridge position like this. It is much easier, but it's a fine substitute if you can't support yourself in this position with your shoulders. If you can't support yourself here, you bend your knees slightly, just 5 or 10 degrees. Lift yourself up by digging your heels down, and you'll bring one knee up towards your chest. Now you're doing an almost straight leg plank through the back side of the leg that's down. And we'll hold that for as much as we can, hopefully about 40 seconds. Take a break, go to the other side. All right, are there any questions on that before we start the timer and we go for it?
Pete, is there a modification for the inner thigh one? Like if you can't do the full variation, is it like on your knee or?
For the inner thigh one, what you can do is plank up so that you have a bent leg. And what I would do is just hold this position because you're still, can you see how the black on black didn't help, but can you see how my legs are top leg in line with my body, almost like I'm Z sitting? And I'm still going to challenge the downside more and get a good challenge here. It's hard because even if I go to like a bent leg and then I lift this top leg, I don't find there's a very good in between, to be honest. So then what I start to do is I have people like in standing with an elastic band, pulling them in a similar direction to challenge that adductor. But for the sake of this test, since that tends to be one that can be a little bit more vulnerable, if you're having a hard time, bend both knees and just plank up this way. Okay? Good question, thank you. I wish I had it, but if you come up with a better modification, I want to know. Because it's a tricky one. All right, so everyone get into your front plank position. You'll hear the beeps, and I'll kind of call out as well. First, you'll hear beep, 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 and then a longer beep. That means start. So go ahead and get into that front plank. 1, 2, 3. Lift your left leg. Lift your left leg. And holding this position. Anyone know any good jokes? You probably muted half of you. Anyways. I should have practiced. I'm sorry that I didn't. So engaging the right side of the front of the right leg into the core. People say planks aren't functional. They tell us about the ability of the body to withstand tension, withstand force. And we're tying that in side by side to look for symmetry. You got 2 seconds. Okay, relax. You got a little 15-second break before we do the other side. Once we do this next one, we're going to be lifting the right leg. So go ahead and get back into your front plank. Lift your right leg. Okay, so now we're looking at the connection of that left side to the core through the front anterior aspect. If there is pain, stop. Okay? I don't want you working through pain right now. If there's the pain of effort and work, push yourself. If you have to stop, I'll call out every now and again from now on. Sorry, I haven't this time. We're at 10 seconds, 30 down, 10 to go. Maybe I'll start calling out about every 5 seconds, 5 to go, so that you see where you had to stop. And okay, go onto your side. Everyone go onto your right side during this break. We're gonna do the top leg lift first. So you're gonna go into a side plank. Everyone plank up. Lift your left leg. 5 seconds in. 10 seconds in. Keep track of when you need to go. 15 seconds in. If you start to lose your form or bend that top leg, just lower it down. 20 seconds in. Try to keep both knees as straight as possible. 25 seconds in. Don't let the hips sag. 30 seconds in. You guys are doing good. 35 seconds in. During the break, you're going to go on to the other side. Go on to the other side now. If you made it, great. If you needed to stop, keep a rough idea of where that was as I call out every 5 seconds. Where are those asymmetries? What are those asymmetries? Go ahead and plank up. Lift that right leg. 5 seconds in. So stability through both hips, 10 seconds in, but the bottom leg taking more of the brunt, 15 seconds in. Always a little harder on the second side because you just worked it on the top side too. 20 seconds in. 15 left. 30 seconds in. We're going to go to the back plank next. 5 seconds left. So that we give the sides a break. Okay, lower down if you made it that whole time. Go onto your forearms. Heels dug in. Knees bent to about 5 to 10 degrees. Go ahead and dig your heels down. Lift your hips. Bring your left knee up towards your chest. Okay, so the left knee should be up. Your hips should be off the ground. You've got your heel dug in and you've got your knee bent to about 5 to 10 degrees. I don't want you hyperextending your knee. We're 15 seconds in. 20 seconds in. 25 seconds in. 30 seconds in. Time goes slow when I'm watching the clock like this. 35 seconds in. Very good, little break. Did you make it? If you didn't, about where did you have to lower down? Are we seeing any asymmetries in times and or effort? Get ready to plank up again. Plank up. Bring that right knee to your chest. Feels good to not be putting all the weight in the right side anymore, doesn't it? 10 seconds in. 15 seconds in. 20 seconds in. Did you guys have a workout? No, that wasn't tonight. 25 seconds in. Last night, right? 30 seconds. 35. Good. Now go back onto your right side. Left leg out straight. Turn your foot inward a little so you're weight bearing through the inside part of your foot to a degree. You're going to plank up and lift that bottom knee. Okay, so you're at 5 seconds in. Challenging the medial part of the thigh. 15 seconds in. How you doing, Suze? 20 seconds in. 25. You guys are going to make it. I can't tell on, you got 6 of you are blacked out. 10 seconds left. But I hope you're doing well. Could be just eating bonbons or something. 3, 2, 1. On to the Left side, final plank position. How far have you gone? How much have you made? What asymmetries are there? It's a good workout. Plank up, lift the bottom knee. A lot of times I'll use this test series as a good core warm-up. You might think about it too. 10 seconds in. 15 seconds in. Halfway. 25 seconds in. 30. Finish strong if you can. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good job. All right. 7 minutes, well spent, right? Let's look at single leg squats now. Should be all warmed up. Hopefully you guys are warmed up. What I want you to do with the single leg squat position, the goal here, I'll be setting a metronome to 30. So it's going to be this fast. And I'm going to want your butt to get to the bottom of your squat at the, however you can count. I like to hit it at the bottom. Okay, but when I squat, I'd like you all to try this with me right now as we get set up. Take your left leg's going to do the single leg squat first. Right big toe is going to be touching the left heel. And then drive that knee up. Drive that right knee up. Okay, so that at the bottom of your single leg squat, I want your thighs to be parallel. So essentially on the left leg, you're going to go down so your thighs are about parallel. When that right toe is touching the left heel and that right knee is driven up. I'll stop the beat so that you can hear me better. Okay, so right big toe touching left heel in a tandem, almost sobriety stance. I lift the right knee up. And then I squat till my thighs are about parallel. That's how low I want to go. And then I just lift the right toe in an actual single leg squat without the toe touch support. Does that make sense? Are we good with that? Okay. So I'm just giving you an idea here as far as the reason I have my thighs parallel at the bottom of the squat is because if they are, my belt line's level. If my other leg goes behind me, it drops into this oblique, already lost my form situation. Okay, are there any questions on that? Okay, so once you've got that, I want you to incorporate your arms. And what you're going to do is the left arm goes forward as you're down. Sorry, left arm goes forward as you're up. Right arm forward as you're down. Left, you're on your left leg. Left arm goes up as right knee goes up. So it's like you're running in this single leg squat position. All right. And the goal is going to be to do 25 of those. And if it's too complicated with the arms, just forget the arms. But 25 of those at 1 every 2 seconds. So get in place. I'm trying to set you up for success with this technique. Because if you squat where you're like down and up without really getting that hip back, you're going to fatigue your quad and burn out. So I want to give you as much capacity as possible first. All right, so you can all hear the beat. I want you to shoot for 25. Start when you're ready and follow the beat however you're able to. All right, everyone, do this somewhat on their own, give or take. Here I go. Okay. Should be finishing up. Either got there or didn't. Sorry, I just muted everybody. There's some bad feedback there. All right, hopefully you got there. We'll talk in a minute. Let's do the other one now. Opposite leg. Hear the beat. Go on your own. Follow the beat. How was it? What'd you say, Susan? You unmute yourself?
I was just saying that my left leg was hard to stay balanced the whole time.
So that's some of the things is like, did you do it? Did you have to touch the other foot down for support? Did you make it all the way through without needing to touch that other foot down? And then just perceived effort. You know, how much sway is there through your system? This is
may not be coordinated enough to actually run after this test.
One of the things about this is like, this is a fixed environment to where I want you to be, and I want you to feel like you're just like on a track, right? Like opposite arm, right? But you should be able to do that without touching the other foot down, without getting off balance, just being able to drive that power because your environment's not changing. Now, when you're running, it is, there's variability and you need to accommodate for that. But in this situation, you can tell, maybe you had to I didn't say this in full, maybe you modified your depth a little bit. Maybe you had to like keep that toe touch on that other foot. If I'm going through this in one-on-one type setting, there are modifications that you can make, but I want you to see and experience running is single leg squatting over and over and over again. And if you had a hard time with that, you have a lot of potential to be a better runner, to not get injured, to have more power if you can master the ability to single leg squat over and over and over again. All right, last test, and then we'll be done with all the physicality, is going to be your single leg heel raise test. So it's going to be a little bit quicker. You're going to find a wall. You're going to bring the opposite knee up to hip height. What you should feel is that when you get to hip height on the up leg, the leg that you're standing on, you should feel your butt kick in on that side. All right, you get enough hip flexion on one side, you're going to feel relative extension through the other. Then you keep that knee locked out straight and you push to the beat. Trying to go 1 per second. Goal is 25. Without bending the knee, without rolling to the outside of the foot. Those are the two major things. All right. So I'm going to.
The knee should be resting against the wall, or the knee is held free?
Knee held free, forcing you to engage the core on that side.
Okay.
High enough that you feel the extension through the opposite hip. All right. So somewhat on your own, I'm going to start the beeping. I want you to see if you can get 25 on each side. If you feel like you're just like pooping out and bending the knee, call it where it is. Okay. So find the beat and you're on your own. Let's do each side and then come back together. Good burn. All right. So good little workout, right? And that's just the test becomes the exercise. If you were weak in one of those and strong in the other, you got to balance that out. Now, there's other variables, and I'm happy to talk one-on-one in more detail and answer any questions related to what you just found out on yourself. I've got 5-10 minutes at least for that. But just know, and we're not going to get into a lot of the running form tonight. I kept you a little bit long here, but from where we ended, and this is again with one of my runners that I was just with today. He was the guy with the left hip. Remember when he was doing a side plank on the left, he couldn't lift the right because he didn't have the strength and stability through the side. And he's dealing with heel pad pain. So I'm talking to him about the heel pad being a shock absorber. So is the hip. He can't absorb shock here. He's absorbing a lot of force here, but he's also dealing with like a calf injury, IT band on the right side where he spends more time because he doesn't want to spend so much time over here. And I just looked at him and I said, let me see this. Okay, so he's kind of springy there. Let me see this. He's springy there. Left leg. Let me see it. Like no spring and no ability to be an elastic coil. So you need to have strength to be an elastic spring. And that's it. Plyometrics train your tendons, which is very important. You got to be doing plyometrics. Your muscles need to be strong to support that elastic recoil of your tendons. So apart from what we just went through here, you might test that on yourself. Like if I bounce on one leg and bounce on the other, do they feel the same? Maeve, do they feel the same on that stiff ankle on one side versus the other? And if not, maybe you are right in that you're spending more time on your right leg or compensating because your body's not trusting the ability to transfer force well through the left side. So are there any questions that you guys have based on what you found on yourselves or in general in the mobility that we looked at, ability to drive from the hip, move from the ankle and the big toe, or core stability as it relates to front, inside, outside, and back of the leg, and single leg squat and single leg heel raise?
It's not necessarily a question as much as it is an observation, but I found it the whole thing really helpful and interesting. I am dealing with an Achilles situation on one foot, and I always feel like when I run, I can't properly engage my glutes. Like I feel like I don't have a strong push off, which is probably why the Achilles is struggling. But when I did the wall, like putting the back against the wall and then trying to like put my leg back, I literally couldn't do it without my back arching. So it's like one of those enlightening things of like, oh, okay, cool. So the front is extremely tight, which is why the back is like not working properly. So
yeah, totally. Like that is, you got too much tension that you're trying to work against. And then if I could demonstrate just one thing that's important on that, like a step up is a good, easy exercise to talk about like what you're dealing with. If I'm going upstairs, I have two ways of doing it. I can push through my back leg and be like a calf dominant activity, or I can really get my body weight over that front leg and I can draw myself up with my quads and my glutes through the front leg. And when someone's dealing with a Achilles injury, I'm trying to get them to focus on that quad glute drive. And you could do like this step up, which is kind of like that single leg squat. Take your Achilles out of it and see how well do you activate glute quad, glute quad, glute quad. And when you're running, work on that drive from above versus you might be like a bouncy calf runner. I don't know you without like seeing that, but
yeah,
if you're dealing with an injury down there, what can you do better? And you're talking about the mobility aspect, just to then build off of that, work on the mobility and then work on the coordination of that quad and that glute working together to take some pressure and awareness off of that Achilles.
okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any asymmetries? Or Patrick, I think you're on mute. Sorry, I muted you all. You unmute yourself.
No, I just thought the whole thing was really cool. Excellent. Thank you. Really.
Thank you. It looked like you made it through most of it.
Yeah, it wasn't all easy, but
Yeah.
like I see things like I took a picture of that screen with that test. I'll use that again. That's just fun abuse, right? Like that's
It's
It's a
good
good
to come back to, and it's good to test yourself periodically and see, am I balanced? How balanced am I? So cool. Anything else? Anyone other questions or? I appreciate the feedback and I appreciate you guys taking the time and it's good to hear like there's some quick things that you can pick up on. If you want to dive into more details on it, I'll just type my email in here. And, Suze has my information as well, but it's just pete@ipa.physio. IPA Physio OC is our clinic. I do individual running evaluations. Suze and I can collaborate together with regards to understanding the training and the volume and the frequency. Utilize her as a resource there. A lot of what I do in here is related more to what we went through tonight, the mobility, the strength, your posture, your body mechanics, and how that translates into you ultimately being better at what you want to do. So if there's no more questions, I'll leave it there. Thank you again, Suze, for the opportunity. And
Thank you, Pete.
yeah, my pleasure. You guys.
Thank you.
So
Good
great.
work.
Thank
Right
you so much.
All right. Good night, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Good
Thanks.
night.